and today I'm about to talk to you about Barony. So Barony is a first-person roguelike, and yes, I am saying a roguelike instead of a roguelite, and I have a reason for that, because Barony is, in my opinion, a serious roguelike. It has all of the necessary components that you would have to make a roguelike game, except of course the game is played in first-person mode, and the game is also played in real time. So there is still, of course, it abandons the top-down perspective and the turn-based combat and internal movement, but it's, in my opinion, the rest of the features that Barony has would make it a roguelike, and if it was turned into like a top-down turn-based game, it would be basically a roguelike game. So it's kind of like a mix of NetHack and Daggerfall. The game's store page also mentions Ultima, but I haven't played Ultima, so I cannot say anything about that. But it has the basic like roguelike dungeon crawling. You have a set of classes that you first, when you start the game, you pick your class. You have your normal roguelike, RPG, leveling up your skills and also your attributes. You need to eat. Every now and then you will get hungry over time in the dungeon when you walk around, and you need to identify potions and scrolls when you use them, or you can just use them randomly, but of course the effects will be completely random. And of course the scrolls also have random text, so even though a scroll might have in your previous run had the same text it has now, the effect might be completely different. And then there is also the roguelike randomness. For example, this was an interesting thing that I did. When I played the game, I actually happened to eat a cream pie that I had found in the dungeon. And that thing decided to... it kind of exploded in my face. And what happened there was I was temporarily blinded, so I almost died because of that. And then once I tried to drink from a fountain, and then a succubus decided to rise from the fountain and killed me. So it definitely has the roguelike randomness and multiple other roguelike features. Naturally, the rest of the things, when you are not finding loot from chests and spread around the levels, you're probably fighting the enemies. There are enemies such as rats and trolls, skeletons, etc. And it's very easy to die in Barony. The game is very, very like difficult. Your difficulty, there isn't like any difficulty setting. You cannot set your difficulty to easy, normal, or hard. Instead, your class basically decides what your difficulty is. Some of the classes, the classes are in no way balanced properly. The game doesn't even try to like balance them. Instead, it clearly states that some classes are simpler and easier for beginners. So for example, it recommends starting off as a warrior for when you're starting the game, and leaves complex classes such as wizards to like harder difficulties. Personally, I don't agree with that. I personally think the caster classes are actually better than the hand-to-hand combat classes, but of course I might be just completely wrong. Also, it might be just my approach to the game. But yeah, it's very easy to die in the dungeons. There are multiple death traps. For example, you can walk randomly into a like a trap that triggers a boulder to fall from the ceiling, and then that crushes you immediately. You don't like, you lose immediately. You die. There is no recovering from that. You need to if you run straight under these holes in the ceiling, you might just die immediately. In some cases you might trigger it when you are nearby, and in that case you might have to run away from the boulder, Indiana Jones style. And like I mentioned, that succubus is also very deadly, so you can die very easily. I haven't this is not a full review. I haven't actually completed this game, and I probably won't complete it anytime soon. I have played for 3 hours, and I have only reached the 3rd floor of the dungeon. So I haven't made it too far in this game, and it's because of the immense difficulty of this game. So it's not really like all that friendly towards people who are impatient and who get frustrated easily, because you will die a lot. But if you are someone who plays like roguelikes, you will probably already be familiar with the amount of death that you will probably encounter in those kinds of games. So that might not come as a huge surprise to you. The story goes something like this. There is this undead lich called Baron Herx, who is terrorizing this city of Hamlet, well, town of Hamlet, and you need to kill the Baron, and that's why the game is called Barony. And naturally, the Baron is in the very deepest part of the dungeon, so you need to descend all the way down into the depths of the dungeon and then find him and kill him. So it's not like your typical roguelike where you need to go down, find an amulet and go back up. At least I haven't got the picture that you would have to get back up. I believe the game ends when you kill the Baron, but I have never even seen the Baron, so I cannot comment on that. Personally, I find the game to be a little bit repetitive. There isn't a whole lot of enemy variety, especially in the first couple of levels, and the levels are constructed using blocks. So that's the very typical way of constructing levels in roguelikes or first-person roguelites. And roguelikes actually probably do it procedurally, but in this case it consists of blocks that are then placed by the computer in random order. So you will probably see the same kinds of areas quite a lot. And I haven't found like interesting loot in the couple of first levels. There aren't any like interesting events that happen, and seriously the enemy variety is that you seriously will only see, if you are lucky and you actually make it to the 2nd or 3rd level, you might start to see trolls, but I haven't seen them all that much, and usually I just run away from them. So mostly you will see skeletons and rats, and those guys aren't too interesting in my opinion. There's also this random thing, so in some cases the level you are on will be a Minotaur level, and what that means is after a while a Minotaur will spawn and it will hunt you down and kill you immediately. There's no way of fighting it, so it will just curb stomp you immediately, and in those levels your job is to basically get out as fast as possible and make it to the next level, and then you are once again safe if that level doesn't happen to be a Minotaur level. I didn't like that a whole lot, honestly, because that makes you rush, and in roguelikes it's not really all that wise to rush. Rushing means that you will skip a lot of very, very important experience, and it means that in the next level your enemies are probably going to be stronger, but you haven't leveled up, and the game is hard as it is. The combat isn't all that interesting, and it's also pretty tough. So when you're fighting enemies, you can either fight them with ranged weaponry, spells, or your melee weapons. And melee combat, in my opinion, is just annoying, because there is this real-time thing where you can block with a shield if you happen to have one. So you need to press space to block. But blocking is often too slow, and timing the blocks and your attacks is just it's very difficult. So what I usually did when I played melee classes, I spammed the attack and hoped that the enemy died before me. but that's obviously not the good way to go about doing it. So instead I usually just skipped all the melee clashes and instead went for the spellcasters who can attack enemies from afar, or some of the ranged classes that have crossbows or bows. Because I felt like combat with them was a little bit easier. Of course, the risk of dying is also a lot smaller when you are fighting from afar. But I just didn't find the melee combat all that interesting or fair. It always felt like the enemy could attack a lot faster, and that meant that I would have to keep my shield up constantly, and your shield doesn't block the enemy attacks completely. It reduces their damage, but it doesn't protect you from their attacks. And especially when you're fighting against multiple opponents, especially when you get surrounded, you have no chance against them if you're playing it with a melee character. And then there's the graphical, I would say, poorness. The game doesn't look good. And one of the worst things about this game is that the game has super low FOV, and it has no FOV slider. So you're stuck with very low FOV, and it can easily make you sick. Especially because the game looks kind of like Wolfenstein 3D in that you are often in very tight corridors. It kind of looks bad. It doesn't look good. I don't like it. I personally don't suffer from simulation sickness, but when I streamed this game, some people were complaining that they felt sick after watching it, so they had to minimize the game or the stream so that they could just listen to me, but they couldn't watch the game. That's bad. Like, that's not supposed to happen. And I also felt kind of sick after playing it. I got eye strain and a mild headache from the low FOV. I checked the Twitter of the devs, and they said that they had a FOV slider in the game after an update, I assume, but that thing hasn't appeared for me, so it might be that the thing is just stuck on the developer side and they have only updated the Windows version, so the Linux version might be outdated, but I'm not sure. I honestly don't know, but one fact I know is that there is no FOV slider for me, so I assume that it's probably not going to be there for you either. And one of the like bigger features that the game also advertises is that it has co-op multiplayer for 4 people. And this is actually pretty interesting because I haven't seen many dungeon crawler games and basically no roguelikes or roguelites that have co-op multiplayer. And I assume that's probably because it's very hard to like design a system where you can respawn if you die, because if people just die and they like drop out, that doesn't make for a good experience. So instead you can play with up to 4 players. Well, you can play. There is 4 players for the multiplayer, so you and 3 others. And well, if someone dies, you need to get to the next level, and then they will respawn without any equipment, of course. But that means that you can, in some cases, the game can be a lot easier if you have multiple people, because you can have your tanks and then your casters, and the casters can cast spells from afar, while the tankers keep the enemies at bay. So there's definitely some co-op strategy stuff that you could do. But one of the things that I found when I played with Liam was that the classes don't synergize all that well. For example, there's the healer class, which his job is to heal people. But the heal ability, the heal spell, only affects him. Like, you can cast it on yourself, but you cannot cast it on anyone else. So that makes the spell kind of useless, because now you are stuck with the potions that you can of course drop, but that's it, that's all of your healing capabilities, and after that you are basically just stuck with your healing spell, which you can use to heal yourself, but you cannot really help your friends with the healing spell. And I don't think that's a very good thing at all. And also the multiplayer isn't all that great like otherwise either, because the game doesn't actually use like Steamworks, so it instead uses its own server client system where one of the players is a server, a host, and other people join him through IP addresses. And because the game isn't actually like peer-to-peer, you need open ports to join. And this is annoying because some people don't have the ability to set up open ports for their internet connection, and it can lead to some security problems. And then there's this weird bug when all the party members die, it still keeps saying get to the next level to revive, and nobody is there to actually revive you, and you need to actually quit the game, not like the whole game, but quit the session and then start a new session and then join that. So that's not all that good either. In my opinion, that feels like sloppy multiplayer, and I honestly don't like the fact that you need open ports for the host so that you can play like multiplayer, because setting up a multiplayer session should be as easy as possible, and when you need to mess with ports and you need to go to your router settings or something like that, or use VPN software like Hamachi to set up your connections, it's just too big of a hassle, and in my opinion it takes a lot away from the experience, and it makes you have to sort these things out before you can actually play the game. So it's not great. The co-op does work. I had some latency issues with it though, so it's not like latency particularly, but desyncs. I had some sync issues with the co-op, so it might be that the co-op doesn't actually work too well for you. So it's something. I mean, I like the concept. When I reviewed Delver, I liked what it did, but I also criticized it for being a little bit simple, and I wanted a little bit more of the complexity. And this game adds the complexity, but it lacks in many ways. In many other ways. So in other ways, Delver is a lot better than Barony, for example. I found that Delver was a lot more pleasant to look at. It had an FOV slider. It had more enemy variety. It had more interesting environments, and of course, it didn't have like all these scroll identifying, and it didn't really have the need to eat occasionally. And in that way, Barony is a lot more hardcore experience. And I really hoped that Barony would be a very it would be Delver, but with more complexity. That's simply not the case. Like, it has the complexity, and in my opinion, it's a very good attempt at doing the first-person roguelike thing, but it has these annoying things like increased repetition, graphics that are, in my opinion, they don't look good. I mean, I can look over these graphical things, because I mean, simple graphics, it works, but it doesn't look good to look at, and the low FOV is something that just makes me not want to recommend the game, because I don't think you would have any enjoyable time playing the game with such a low FOV. So my recommendation is to hold off from buying this game right now. It only costs €7 though, so if they fix the FOV, you should probably look at it and consider it, but because the FOV situation is just bad, and in my opinion there just isn't a whole lot to see, at least in the first couple of levels. Of course, that's just a fraction of the complete experience, but that's how far I have so far made it, because the game is super difficult. So I would probably hold off from buying this, but if they fix the FOV, it's probably worth picking it up. Especially if they add a little bit more to the game, or it ends up being on sale. It was on sale when it first launched, but at the moment it's back to €7, so you might want to wait at least a little bit. But I hope these are things, at least these technical things like FOV, can easily be solved, and if they add a little bit more variety, which should be possible, I believe there is a good chance that this game will actually become something quite awesome. So definitely keep an eye out for it, but I personally would recommend that you wait at least a little bit. So that has been me and Barony, and we will see in future videos.